It's a bright Saturday morning. Birds are chirping. The sun is shining with the promise of a hot summer day ahead. The sidewalks sizzle and sweat beads on your face. Your family has a special day planned. You're in Calgary, and you're on your way to one of the city's most famous destinations. Everyone's excited. The kids are running just in front of you on 12th Street as you head towards St. George's Island on the south bank of the Bow River. They're chattering about dinosaurs and wildlife as everyone lists their favorite animal. A smile crosses your face. You think you're going to be making precious memories. Little do you know that you're about to encounter a horror from the past. One of the kids runs up a little further and is on the bridge connecting to the zoo. You see him stop. Something has their attention. The calmness you felt a second ago is suddenly wrecked. They look scared. The sound of the water drowns out the voices, so you can't hear what's happening. But your instinct says there's something wrong. You feel a chill down your spine, and you call out to them. They run back. Concerned and confused, you ask the kids about what just happened. They tell you that they saw a strange little boy under the bridge. He had a ball in his hand, and he wanted to play. But there was something not quite right about him. When you get to the spot to investigate, there's no one there. And yet, you hear a voice calling for help. I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Join me as we cross the Bow River to find the haunted and horrific history of the Calgary Zoo Bridge. Connecting the vast, wide-open spaces of the prairies and the majestic foothills of the Rockies is Calgary, Alberta. It's the largest city in the province and is the center of Canada's oil industry. Despite its prosperity, Cowtown, as it's affectionately called, is steeped in Western culture, which comes to light every year during the Calgary Stampede. But white cowboy hats aren't the only thing that it's known for. In 1946, Calgary was the site of a tragic murder. And that's where we're going to head today, to the point where the Elbow River and the Bow River meet, on St. George's Island, where the Calgary Zoo is located. Sprawled across 120 acres of dense brush and lush trees, the zoo houses over 1,000 animals across 272 diverse species and at least one ghost. The zoo is connected to 12th Street by a pedestrian bridge, which is one of the most haunted places in Calgary. To understand what happened there and the sinister reason behind it, we have to travel back in time to 1946. And a warning, this part of the story is tragically very real and can be graphic in nature, so please take care. In 1946, St. George's Island was a great place for families to spend time together, picnic, walk, and play on the banks of the Bow River. Donald Henry Goss was a beautiful little boy with sandy blonde hair and big brown eyes. Donnie, as he was known by his loved ones, was energetic and loved to run around the neighborhood, play baseball, and ride his bike. The 6-year-old had a twin sister named Doreen and 2 brothers, Kenneth and Grant. Together, they lived with their parents in an apartment above a grocery store. In 1946, Donnie had just finished grade 1 at Bridgeland Cottage School and was excited about spending the summer playing before starting grade 2. Little Donnie didn't know life before World War II, which had ended just the year earlier, and his parents were desperately trying to get back to some sort of normalcy. The family was close and loved spending time together, and they settled into a routine where the father worked at the railway yard and the mother stayed at home to raise the children. At the time, Calgary was a much smaller city where everyone knew their neighbors and kids had more freedom. Donnie and his siblings would go out and play until it was time for dinner and the streetlights went on. With the war behind them, things felt safer, and they had a general sense of relief. Most people thought their kids were safe. That serenity would soon be shattered. Wednesday, July 24th, 1946, was extremely hot in Calgary, and like most kids in the neighborhood, Donnie, his older brother Kenneth, and his friend George went to St. George's Island to play. They climbed on trees, swung on swings, and cooled off on the edges of the Bow River. At 6:30 p.m., the trio set out to walk to the nearby playground. Little did they know that a predator was among them, watching. When the boys arrived at the park, they split up. Kenneth and George headed nearby to play baseball, while Donnie went over to the playground with the younger kids. Donnie played on the smaller swings, while others were on the slide. He didn't know that he was being carefully observed. He had no idea he was in danger. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patorick was out for an evening stroll when she noticed a strange man lurking around the playground. She made a mental note of the man she would later describe as being around 55 years old, about 5 foot 2 inches, and wearing a dark suit and a brown hat. Mrs. Mary Hack was also in the park with her daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren when she noticed a peculiar man watching her family. She was also walking through the woods when she felt she was being followed. The Calgary newspaper reported 2 days later, on July 26, 1946, that Mrs. Hack said, quote, "I didn't realize he was following me, but when he passed by close to me, I got frightened and jumped. And then he mumbled, 'There's nothing here.'" She was so disturbed by the interaction that she hurried back to her daughter-in-law and also made note of the strange man. She would go on to describe him as being 5 foot 2 inches, well-built, not heavy and not skinny, wearing dark brown clothes. Mrs. Hack said he was weather-beaten and wasn't clean. What neither Mrs. Patorick and Mrs. Hack knew that day in the park was that they had just seen a predator, and he was on the hunt for his next victim. Unbeknownst to all of this, Donnie was having fun on the playground while his older brother Kenneth was nearby. What happened next was reported in the Calgary Herald on July 26, 1946. Kenneth recounted that, quote, "He and his friend were playing baseball with some other kids while Donnie was at the smaller park. When they finished playing ball, he returned to the swings to get his younger brother, but Donnie was nowhere to be found. He assumed that Donnie had gone home. When he arrived at the family apartment a little while later, Kenneth realized that his younger brother wasn't there. He alerted the family, and Kenneth left home with his Uncle Vic. They raced back to the park to look for Donnie. It was now around 8 p.m., and the sun was low in the sky. Family and friends joined them soon after on a frantic search for the 6-year-old. Henry Goss left his job to look for his son, as did many of his coworkers from the railway. As darkness descended, a sense of foreboding came with it, but still, hope remained. A massive overnight search was quickly organized. Every stone was turned, every path walked, and bushes were scoured. Donnie's name echoed on the edges of the glacier waters of the Bow River. As the sun rose the following day, there was still no sign of the blond little boy with the easy smile. By now, police had been alerted, and they began another search of the area with the help of park employees. At 2 p.m., Ruff, a German Shepherd RCMP dog, joined the search as Henry Goss watched like a hawk nearby. His eyes were blurry and tired, sick from worry for his little boy that had vanished. Donnie Goss's disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. Parents held their kids closer, hugged them a little tighter. Frantic family members and worried neighbors desperately searched through the airy, dark woods covering the island. The only sound that broke the silence were calls for Donnie and the rustling of the leaves. The wind carried his name like a chilling reminder of his unknown fate and echoed throughout the park. Search efforts intensified, and St. John's Ambulance organized another search, and Donnie's grandmother joined them. This search will be a parent's worst nightmare come true, because what they found was graphic and disturbing in nature. Almost 24 hours after he was last seen, Donnie Goss had been found. Hidden in some deep bushes, directly under the Zoo Bridge, was the little boy's lifeless body. Donnie had been badly beaten and had been stabbed 9 times. Dr. Lola McLatchkey, a pathologist, examined him and stated that the little boy had been possibly assaulted before and after death. What's worse is that he wasn't the killer's only victim. As Calgary mourned the devastating loss of Donnie Goss, fear rippled through the city. Who would have killed such an innocent little soul? The tragic news traveled quickly as friends, neighbors, and heartbroken Calgarians showed up at the Goss home to offer support. The city of Calgary offered $1,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer. Calgary Police Inspector Malcolm Boyd told the Calgary Herald that, quote, "It's the most fiendish, cold-blooded murderer in the city's history." The newspaper stated that there were leads on the case. Donnie's older brother had told police that a man had been watching them and walked toward the island store when Donnie went to the swings. He described the man as an old man, 5 feet 6 inches tall, skinny, and he looked mean. The investigation continued as Calgary laid to rest Donnie Goss. The city, meanwhile, was on edge and mourning. And then a man was arrested. It happened about a month after Donnie was found under the Zoo Bridge, and he was in custody for a completely unrelated crime. police didn't know that the man that they had just apprehended for the breaking and entering and theft of the Diamond Cafe had a horrifically dark and sinister secret. Donald Sherman Staley was a 29-year-old Canadian Army veteran who hailed from Bracebridge, Ontario. He always struck people as strange. He had glaring icy blue eyes and continuously pushed back his jet black hair. Staley had just arrived in Calgary from Vancouver, British Columbia, a few days before Donnie Goss had gone missing. Unbeknownst to investigators, in the brutal Zoo Bridge murder case, Staley was arrested for breaking and entering and theft of the Diamond Cafe. Staley was sentenced to 1 year in the Lethbridge jail. While serving time, on August 11th, Donald Staley was interviewed about his time in Vancouver right before he arrived in Calgary. What he told police would haunt investigators for life. Donald Staley told police that on July 4th, he spent the day at the beach in Vancouver's Stanley Park, where he befriended 2 boys, 8-year-old Bobby Sherman and 11-year-old Gary Billings. He treated the boys to ice cream and snacks, then hung out on the beach, and the group even chatted with an RCMP constable. He introduced himself as Donald Sherman Staley and said that he had recently been discharged from the Scottish Regiment. This would be a major detail, so take note as I share what happened next. As the day came to a close, Staley, Bobby, and Gary parted ways, but promised to meet up the very next day. When Bobby arrived at Gary's house in the morning to head to the beach, he was already gone. Gary Billings would never be seen alive again. As authorities and loved ones searched frantically for Gary, Staley arrived in Calgary. When news of Donnie's murder in Calgary reached Vancouver, investigators in British Columbia realized that there were haunting similarities between the 2 cases. Around the time Calgary police found Donnie hidden under the Zoo Bridge, the decomposing corpse of Gary Billings was unearthed from a shallow grave in Stanley Park. And just like Donnie, Gary had been savagely stabbed and assaulted both before and after his death. His body was found buried beneath some logs in a nearby grove. But police in Vancouver had a name: Donald Sherman Staley. While in custody in Lethbridge, Staley was interviewed about killing 11-year-old Gary Billings. Vancouver police had identified him thanks to testimony by both Bobby Sherman and the RCMP constable who had spoken with him on July 4th. They had collected Staley's photograph, fingerprints, and Army records, and were waiting for him to resurface in order to make an arrest. When they found him in Lethbridge, they went to press him about Gary's death, and to their surprise, he confessed, and then added another haunting detail. He admitted to the brutal killing of 6-year-old Donnie Goss. Staley told police he had set his sights on little Donnie while he played in the park that beautiful summer evening a month earlier. He stalked the little boy and watched as Donnie played on the swings from a distance until he saw his opportunity. That's when Staley approached the 6-year-old and gained the young boy's trust, then lured him away from the crowded park. When they reached the secluded area, he dragged Donnie deep into the bush, where he stabbed, assaulted, and brutally murdered him. Staley then tried to cover up this horrific crime by hiding the child's body under some branches directly underneath the Zoo Bridge. The gruesome crime shocked the entire city, province, and country. The Calgary Herald reported on August 19, 1946, that the brutal and sadistic slaying created a state of near panic in Calgary and Vancouver homes as police sought the killer. Soon after, news broke that the child killer had been caught, and a sense of relief spread. It would be short-lived, as a trial would soon follow. As the trial unfolded, chilling details of the 29-year-old Donald Sherman Staley's killings emerged. They painted a ghastly picture of a cold-blooded killer as 23 witnesses testified in court. Despite Staley's insanity plea, the jury's verdict was swift and damning: guilty. The courthouse was cloaked in a palpable sense of dread as Staley, devoid of emotion, faced his sentencing. Chief Justice Howson asked him if he had any final words. His reply sent shivers down the gallery. "Nothing, my lord." Staley's face showed no emotion. His icy demeanor sent a wave of horror throughout the courtroom. Chief Justice Howson then said, "The jury has found you guilty of the murder of Donnie Goss as charged." Then the judge ordered Staley to be hanged for his crime. On December 18th, 1946, at the Lethbridge Provincial Gallows, an air of darkness clouded the sky. Donald Sherman Staley had his final meal. Upon finishing, he was read his rights. Then he slowly walked up the wooden steps of the gallows. A hood was placed over his head. The silence was deafening, and only broken by the sound of the noose tightening around his neck. The seconds passed. The executioner pulled the lever, and then a heavy thud echoed across the yard. With a sickening snap, Staley plummeted to his death. However, the end of his life isn't the end of the story. You see, Staley's cruelty left a departed soul reluctantly behind and unable to leave this world. And he haunts Calgarians to this day. The legacy of Donald Sherman Staley's horrific crimes continues to frighten those who dare to walk St. George's Island and across the Zoo Bridge. The unease and anguish left behind is a scar on the city that is slow to heal. Over the years, terrifying encounters of ghostly occurrences have persisted in the area. Those left behind have been questioned in terror what they have seen and experienced. People who walk along the paths near the Calgary Zoo at night have heard the tragic cries of a young child desperately calling out for help. They will search the bushes in vain because the source of the haunting calls is never found. The spirit of the little boy lingers near the maintenance building where workers late at night have been frightened by ghosts knocking on the door. When they gather the courage to investigate, they find nothing but an empty, dark parking lot staring back. Those who have experienced this believe it's Donnie Goss looking for someone to play with from the great beyond. One brave security guard who encountered this spirit discovered a child's ball mysteriously outside the entrance door. He felt a mix of fear and compassion, and drawn to the supernatural, he engaged in a ghostly game of catch. He would throw the ball into the parking lot, only to find it returned a little while later that same evening. The guard credited this ghostly paranormal experience to Donnie Goss, unwilling to depart from where he was so brutally murdered. Despite the construction of a new bridge in 2017, which replaced the old steel frame Zoo Bridge, the area is still steeped in tragedy. Those who walk or jog nearby have reported strange experiences while crossing the river. They have heard a small child's cry pierce their path, prompting many to call local police for a child in distress. Sadly, when police arrive to investigate, they find no trace or cause for alarm. Instead, it is believed that it is the lingering cries of a spectral child seeking closure in the place where he was slain. This is what happened to a family one summer evening while out for a stroll along the walkways near the Calgary Zoo Bridge. The young daughter, age 7, was collecting some wildflowers along the path when her parents noticed that she seemed to be giggling and talking to somebody. They also noticed that there was nobody else nearby in the grassy area. When the parents told the little girl that it was time to head home, the girl didn't want to go. Her mother inquired further, and the young girl said that she wanted to stay and play with her new friend, Donnie. Concerned, the mom looked all around and saw no other kids on the walking trail. She asked her daughter where the boy was. The young girl pointed right next to her and said, "He's right here, Mommy. Donnie wants me to stay and play with him." As the night sky casts a dark glow over St. George's Island and the Zoo Bridge, this tragic story of murder and sorrow comes to a close. Should you find yourself in Calgary and near Donnie Goss's final resting place, take a moment to remember the little boy with the blonde hair. His restless spirit still lingers in the dark, looking for a kindred spirit to play with him in the afterlife. Thank you everyone for joining me this week on our journey through the Calgary Zoo Bridge. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is hosted and written by me, Nadine Bailey, with help from our senior producer, Delia Vasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Rosalind Kufer. If you would like to support the podcast, please follow and share. And if you're able to give us a like and a 5-star written review, that is always appreciated. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, or if you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime that you would like for us to cover on this podcast, please email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.